The thunder cracked across the Montana sky as Rebecca Lawson's horse collapsed beneath her, a terrible whinny escaping its lips before it went still forever. The downpour was merciless, turning the dirt trail into a flowing river of mud that pulled at her boots as she struggled to free herself from underneath her fallen companion. It was 1878, and dying alone on the frontier was not an uncommon fate, but Rebecca had sworn she wouldn't be one of those sad stories told in saloons. "Easy there," came a deep voice from behind her, barely audible over the pounding rain. Rebecca whipped around, her drenched blonde hair plastering against her face as she reached for the small derringer hidden in her skirt pocket. A tall man sat atop a muscular chestnut stallion, water cascading off the brim of his worn leather hat. His face was partially hidden by the shadow it cast, but she could make out a strong jawline covered in stubble. He dismounted with the easy grace of someone who'd spent his life on horseback. "Your mare's gone," he said, approaching cautiously. "Legs broken beyond repair, I reckon." Rebecca fought back tears. That horse had been her faithful companion since she'd left St. Louis 3 years ago. "She was all I had," she whispered. The stranger's expression softened. "Name's Lucas Pendleton. Got a camp not far from here." He gestured to the darkening sky. "This storm ain't letting up anytime soon, and these parts ain't friendly after dark." He extended a calloused hand toward her. "You'll rest in my tent tonight. Tomorrow we can figure things out." Rebecca hesitated, eyeing his outstretched hand. She'd learned to be wary of men offering help on the frontier, but the alternative was a night exposed to the elements, and the temperature was already dropping with the setting sun. "Rebecca Lawson," she replied, finally taking his hand. His grip was firm but gentle as he helped pull her to her feet. Lucas retrieved her saddlebags from the dead mare, securing them to his stallion. "Sorry about your horse," he said quietly. "I know what it means to lose a good mount out here." Rebecca nodded, unable to speak as she took a final look at the animal that had carried her through so many miles. Lucas helped her onto his horse before climbing up behind her. His chest pressed against her back as he reached around for the reins, and despite her predicament, Rebecca felt a strange flutter in her stomach at the closeness. The rain continued its assault as they rode, but Lucas seemed to know the trail by heart, guiding his horse through the gathering darkness with confidence. After what felt like an eternity, Rebecca spotted a faint orange glow ahead. "Home, sweet home," Lucas said close to her ear, his breath warm against her cold skin. It wasn't much a canvas tent staked firmly into the ground, a small covered area for his horse, and a fire pit protected by an ingenious arrangement of stones and canvas that kept the rain at bay. But to Rebecca, exhausted and soaked to the bone, it looked like paradise. Lucas helped her down from the horse and quickly led the animal to shelter. "Get yourself inside," he called over the rain. "There's dry clothes in my pack. They'll be big but better than what you're wearing now." Rebecca ducked into the tent, surprised to find it spacious enough to stand in. A bedroll lay neatly at one side, alongside a trunk, and several crates organized to create a makeshift living space. She found the pack he'd mentioned and pulled out a flannel shirt and pants that would indeed swim on her frame. The impropriety of wearing a man's clothing hardly seemed important given the circumstances. She had just finished changing when Lucas entered, bringing a gust of wet air with him. He carried a pot of what smelled like coffee and had a bundle under his arm. "Figured you'd be hungry," he said, carefully avoiding looking directly at her until she'd settled onto a crate with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. He handed her a tin cup of steaming coffee and unwrapped the bundle to reveal beef jerky and hardtack. "It ain't much of a feast," he apologized. Rebecca accepted the offerings gratefully. "It's perfect. Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Pendleton. Lucas, he corrected, removing his hat to reveal thick brown hair that curled slightly at the ends. His eyes, she now saw, were a striking blue-green that reminded her of the ocean she'd seen just once in her life. What brings a lady like yourself out here alone? He asked, settling across from her. Rebecca sipped the coffee, welcoming its warmth. I was headed to Willow Creek. My uncle passed away 6 months ago and left me his ranch. I've been managing it alone, but I needed supplies. She gestured toward the tent entrance. Clearly, I should have heeded the warnings about this storm. Lucas nodded thoughtfully. Willow Creek's still a good day's ride from here. Old Jeremiah Lawson was your uncle. You knew him? Rebecca asked, surprised. Everyone knew Jeremiah. Good man, fair. Lucas smiled. Taught me a thing or two about breaking horses when I first came west. Outside, thunder rumbled and the rain intensified. Lucas looked up at the canvas ceiling. We'll be stuck here at least until morning. Storm like this can turn creeks into rivers overnight. Rebecca felt a flicker of anxiety. Spending the night in close quarters with a male stranger, was hardly proper. But Lucas had made no inappropriate moves, and his eyes held nothing but concern. I appreciate your hospitality, she said. I fear what might have happened had you not come along. Just doing what anyone would, he replied, though they both knew that wasn't necessarily true in these lands. As they ate and the storm raged outside, Lucas told her about himself. He'd come west from Pennsylvania after the war, looking for a fresh start. He worked as a wrangler for various ranches, but his real passion was training horses. He was currently between jobs, having just finished a stint at the tailor spread 20 miles south. And now, I'm heading north to the Morrison place. They've got some new stock they want gentled before spring roundup, he explained. Rebecca found herself relaxing in his company. There was something reassuring about his presence, a quiet confidence that didn't need to announce itself. What about you? He asked. Running a ranch alone isn't easy for anyone, let alone a woman, she finished with a raised eyebrow. He had the grace to look slightly abashed. I was going to say someone new to the territory, but yes, being a woman doesn't make it any easier out here. Rebecca smiled despite herself. I'm tougher than I look, Mr. Pendleton. My uncle taught me everything he knew during my visits, and what he didn't teach me, I've learned the hard way. I don't doubt it, he said, and the respect in his voice seemed genuine. As the night deepened, Lucas insisted Rebecca take the bedroll while he made do with blankets on the ground. She protested, but he was firm. My ma would haunt me from beyond the grave if I took the bed while a lady slept on the floor, he said with such conviction that Rebecca finally relented. Sleep came surprisingly easily despite the unfamiliar surroundings, and the storm's continued assault. Perhaps it was the bone-deep exhaustion, or perhaps it was the strange sense of security she felt with Lucas nearby. Either way, Rebecca drifted off to the sound of rain on canvas and the occasional soft snore from her unexpected guardian. Morning arrived with startling brightness. The storm had passed, leaving behind a washed, clean world sparkling in the early sunlight. Rebecca woke to find herself alone in the tent, but the scent of coffee and cooking food drew her outside. Lucas stood by a small fire, frying bacon in a cast-iron pan. He'd changed into a fresh shirt, and his wet clothes hung from a makeshift line strung between 2 trees. "Morning," he greeted her. "Thought you might sleep till noon the way you were snoring." Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth in mortification. "I do not snore." His laugh was rich and warm. "No, you don't, but your face just now was worth the fib." He handed her a plate with bacon and a thick slice of bread. "Eat up. We've got a long ride ahead if we're going to get you back to Willow Creek." "We?" Rebecca questioned. You think I'm going to let you try to walk there? Lucas asked, raising an eyebrow. Or maybe you plan to sprout wings? Rebecca felt her cheeks warm. I wouldn't want to impose further. You've already been more than kind. Lucas waved away her concerns. Morrison's place is on the way. Besides, what kind of man would I be to leave a lady stranded? They ate in companionable silence, the woods around them alive with the sounds of birds and small animals going about their morning business. Rebecca watched Lucas surreptitiously as he packed up the camp with efficient movements. There was something compelling about him that went beyond his obvious physical attributes. He carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who knew his place in the world. By mid-morning, they were on the trail. Rebecca sat behind Lucas this time, her arms wrapped around his waist for stability. The closeness was both unsettling and pleasant, and she found herself noticing small details about him, the scent of leather and pine that clung to his clothes, the way his shoulders moved as he controlled the horse, the occasional humming of a tune she didn't recognize. "Tell me about your ranch," Lucas said over his shoulder as they rode. Rebecca described the modest spread 200 acres, a small herd of cattle, a half-dozen horses, and a cabin that needed more repairs than she could count. "Uncle Jeremiah started it from nothing," she said proudly. "Came out here with just a mule and a dream, according to him. He built everything himself." "Why'd he leave it to you?" Lucas asked. "No children of his own," Rebecca explained, "and I was the only one in the family who ever showed any interest in his uncivilized life out west. I used to spend summers with him when I was younger. And your folks were all right with you moving out here alone?" Rebecca fell silent for a moment. "They passed in '73, cholera. There was nothing left for me back east after that." Lucas's hand covered hers where it rested against his waist. "I'm sorry," he said simply. The gesture of comfort, brief though it was, sent a wave of warmth through Rebecca that had nothing to do with the mounting heat of the day. They stopped to rest the horse around midday. Lucas shared his canteen and some dried fruit he'd packed. Sitting beside a small stream with the spring wildflowers beginning to dot the landscape, Rebecca found herself studying his profile as he gazed across the valley. "What?" he asked, catching her look. "Just wondering what makes a man choose this life," she replied honestly. "Always moving, never putting down roots." Lucas seemed to consider her question seriously. "Maybe I haven't found the right place to plant them yet," he said finally. "Or the right reason." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. Both of them had known loss, had sought new beginnings in this harsh but beautiful country. The moment was broken by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Lucas was on his feet instantly, hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "Stay behind me," he instructed, his voice low and urgent. 3 riders appeared over the rise, moving at a steady trot toward them. Rebecca felt tension radiating from Lucas until the lead rider raised a hand in greeting. "Pendleton." "Thought that was your ugly horse," called the man, a grizzled fellow with a sheriff's badge pinned to his vest. Lucas relaxed visibly. "Sheriff Adams, you're a long way from town." The men dismounted and Lucas introduced Rebecca. Sheriff Adams tipped his hat to her respectfully. "Madam, you wouldn't happen to be Jeremiah Lawson's niece, would you?" "I am," Rebecca confirmed, surprised. "How did you know?" "Word travels. Plus, you've got his eyes." The sheriff turned serious. "Been tracking some cattle rustlers. They hit the Turner place 2 nights ago during the storm. You two seen anything suspicious?" They hadn't, and after a brief exchange of information, the sheriff and his deputies continued on their way. But the encounter left a shadow over the previously pleasant day. "Rustlers are getting bolder," Lucas commented as they resumed their journey. "You need to be careful out at your place. It's isolated." Rebecca heard the concern in his voice. "I keep a rifle by the door and another above the mantel," she assured him. "Uncle Jeremiah made sure I knew how to use them." Lucas didn't seem entirely satisfied with this answer, but he didn't press the issue. They rode through the afternoon, the landscape gradually changing as they approached Willow Creek territory. Lucas pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area, and Rebecca found herself laughing more than she had in months. There was an ease between them that belied their brief acquaintance. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, they crested a hill, and Rebecca caught sight of her ranch in the distance, a small cabin with outbuildings nestled in a valley, smoke rising from the chimney. "That's odd," she said, frowning. "I didn't leave a fire burning." Lucas immediately reined in the horse. "Stay here," he instructed, reaching for his rifle. "Not a chance," Rebecca retorted, already sliding down from the saddle. "That's my home." They approached cautiously, using the trees for cover. As they got closer, Rebecca's confusion turned to anger when she spotted 3 unfamiliar horses tied up outside her cabin. "The rustlers," Lucas breathed, his expression grim. They must have figured an empty ranch would be easy pickings. Through the cabin window, they could see movement men ransacking her home, pulling open drawers and upending furniture. "My cattle," Rebecca whispered, her eyes darting to the corral where her small herd should have been. The enclosure was empty. Lucas studied the situation with narrowed eyes. "They've probably already moved your cattle. These must be the ones staying behind to clean out anything valuable from the house." He turned to her. "We need to get to town, bring back the sheriff." Rebecca shook her head firmly. "That's my home, and everything I own is in there. I'm not letting them take it." Before Lucas could stop her, she had raised his rifle and fired a shot into the air. The effect was immediate. The cabin door burst open, and a man with a bandana covering his face appeared, gun drawn. "That's far enough," Rebecca called out. "The next shot won't be a warning." Lucas muttered something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like a prayer before stepping up beside her, his own revolver aimed steadily at the cabin. "We've got you surrounded," he shouted. "Sheriff Adams and his men are right behind us." It was a bluff, but it worked. After a tense standoff and some shouted negotiations, the 3 rustlers emerged from the cabin, hands raised. Lucas kept them covered while Rebecca collected their weapons. "Tie them up," Lucas instructed her. "We'll take them into town ourselves." Using rope from her barn, Rebecca secured the men to her porch posts, tight enough to hold but not cruel. One of them, younger than the others, kept his head down in shame. The oldest, clearly the leader, spat at her feet. "You think this changes anything, lady? There's more of us than you can handle. This territory ain't for women alone." Lucas stepped forward, his voice deadly quiet. "She's not alone." The simple statement carried such conviction that even the belligerent leader fell silent. As they prepared to take the men to town, Rebecca discovered that her cattle hadn't been moved after all. They'd been hidden in a box canyon a short distance from the ranch. It would be work to round them up again, but they weren't lost. The ride to Willow Creek was tense, with Lucas and Rebecca taking turns watching their prisoners. They arrived after dark, causing quite a stir as they paraded the captured rustlers down the main street to the sheriff's office. Deputy Miller was manning the jail in Sheriff Adams' absence, and seemed both impressed and somewhat dubious of their story, until one of the rustlers confirmed it, hoping for leniency. "Sheriff's been after this gang for months," the deputy told them as he locked the cells. "He'll be mighty pleased when he gets back tomorrow." He eyed Rebecca with new respect. "Your uncle would be proud, Miss Lawson. That was some quick thinking." They left the prisoners in Deputy Miller's capable hands and made their way to the town's only hotel. Lucas insisted on paying for a room for Rebecca, waving away her protests. "You need proper rest," he said. "And I'll bed down in the livery. We can head back to your place in the morning." Rebecca caught his arm as he turned to leave. "Have dinner with me, at least," she said. "The hotel restaurant is supposed to be decent." Lucas glanced down at his trail-worn clothes. "I'm hardly fit for dining with a lady." Rebecca smiled. "I'm wearing your clothes, remember? I think we're beyond standing on ceremony." The hotel dining room was nearly empty given the late hour, but the cook was persuaded to serve them a simple meal of stew and fresh bread. Sitting across from Lucas at a proper table, with a real lamp casting a warm glow between them, Rebecca was struck by how handsome he was when not covered in trail dust and rain. "Thank you," she said softly after they'd eaten in comfortable silence for a while. "Not just for the rescue in the storm, but for today. Most men would have insisted I stay behind." Lucas shrugged, looking somewhat embarrassed by her gratitude. "You showed plenty of grit, reminded me that courage isn't about size or strength." He met her eyes. "Your uncle chose well when he left the ranch to you." The simple vote of confidence meant more to Rebecca than she cared to admit. Running the ranch alone had been harder than she'd anticipated, and there were nights when doubt crept in, whispering that she should sell the place and return east. "Will you still be heading to the Morrison Ranch?" she asked, trying to keep her tone casual. "That's the plan," Lucas replied, though something in his expression suggested the idea held less appeal than before. After dinner, he walked her to her room, pausing awkwardly at the door. "Well," he said, "I suppose this is good night." Rebecca knew what propriety demanded a polite thank you, a demure retreat into her room, perhaps a promise to see him in the morning. Instead, she found herself rising on tiptoe and pressing a soft kiss to his cheek. "Good night, Lucas," she whispered. His eyes widened in surprise, but before he could respond, she slipped into her room, heart pounding with the boldness of her action. Morning brought clear skies and the news that Sheriff Adams had returned and was extremely pleased with their capture of the rustlers. He had identified them as part of a larger gang operating throughout the territory, but believed the ringleaders were now in custody. "You've done this community a service," he told Rebecca and Lucas as they prepared to leave town. "Those men have been terrorizing small ranchers for months." The ride back to Rebecca's ranch was different from their journey the previous day. Something had shifted between them, an awareness that had been building since their first meeting now acknowledged, if not yet acted upon. They arrived to find the cabin in disarray from the rustlers' search, but nothing a few hours' work couldn't set right. Lucas immediately set about repairing the door the men had damaged, while Rebecca sorted through her belongings. "They didn't take much," she reported. "Some food, a bit of money I had hidden. Could have been worse." Lucas nodded, hammering a hinge back into place. "Still, you should consider getting a dog. Early warning if anyone comes around." Rebecca watched him work, appreciating both his practical skills and the way his muscles moved beneath his shirt. "Are you worried about me, Mr. Pendleton?" she teased. He looked up, his expression serious despite her light tone. "Yes," he said simply. "I am." The directness of his answer caught her off guard. She turned away, busying herself with sweeping up broken crockery to hide her flushed cheeks. They worked together throughout the day, setting the cabin to rights and checking on the livestock. Lucas helped her move the cattle back to the main pasture, their horses working in tandem as if they'd been partners for years rather than days. As evening approached, Lucas grew quiet, and Rebecca knew he was thinking about leaving. The Morrison Ranch would be expecting him, and he had obligations to meet. She prepared a simple supper, acutely aware that it might be their last meal together. The thought left a hollow feeling in her chest that surprised her with its intensity. How had this man become so important to her in just 2 days? They ate on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. A comfortable silence stretched between them, broken only by the sounds of the cooling night crickets beginning their evening chorus, an owl calling from the nearby woods. "Beautiful country," Lucas commented, gazing out at the vista before them. "Your uncle chose well." "It is," Rebecca agreed. "Though it gets lonely sometimes." She hadn't meant to admit that vulnerability, but the words slipped out before she could stop them. Lucas turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "Rebecca," he began, then seemed to struggle for words. "I need to head to Morrison's tomorrow." "I gave my word." "I understand," she said quickly, trying to mask her disappointment. "You have commitments I wouldn't expect, but," he interrupted gently, "the job's only for a month after that." He took a deep breath. "After that, I was thinking I might see if there's work around these parts." Rebecca's heart skipped. "Willow Creek could always use a good horse trainer," she said, striving to keep her voice steady. "And I have some horses that could use gentling." Lucas set his plate aside and moved closer to her on the porch step. "Is that the only reason you'd want me to come back?" he asked, his voice low. Rebecca found herself unable to look away from his gaze, so intent and hopeful. "No," she whispered, "not the only reason." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you," he confessed. "From the moment I found you on that trail." "It sounds crazy we barely know each other sometimes," Rebecca interrupted, placing her hand over his where it rested against her cheek. "Sometimes you just know." The kiss, when it came, was gentle at first, a question, an offering. But as Rebecca responded, winding her arms around his neck, it deepened into something more urgent, a promise of things to come. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I'll come back," he vowed. "1 month. And then, if you'll have me, I'd like to court you properly." Rebecca smiled, her heart fuller than she could remember it being in years. "I'll be waiting," she promised. "This land needs more than one pair of hands to tame it anyway." Lucas laughed, pulling her against his chest. "Is that the only reason you want me to come back?" he teased, echoing his earlier question. Rebecca looked up at him, no longer afraid to show what she was feeling. "No," she said softly, "not the only reason at all." True to his word, Lucas returned exactly 1 month later. He rode up to the ranch at sunset, just as Rebecca was finishing her evening chores. She spotted him from the corral and ran to meet him, propriety forgotten as she threw herself into his arms the moment his boots hit the ground. Their courtship was swift but proper. Lucas took a position breaking horses for neighboring ranches, but spent every free moment helping Rebecca improve her own spread. The townsfolk nodded approvingly at the match, Jeremiah Lawson's determined niece, and the quiet, hard-working horse trainer seemed well suited. They were married that autumn, with Sheriff Adams presiding and the entire town in attendance. The ceremony was held on Rebecca's, now their front porch, with the mountains ablaze in fall colors as their backdrop. As years passed, the ranch prospered under their joint care. They added a proper barn, expanded the house, and built their herd into one of the most respected in the territory. Children came, 2 boys and a girl, filling the once quiet cabin with laughter and noise. On their 10th anniversary, Lucas surprised Rebecca with a gift, a new tent, much like the one she'd sheltered in that stormy night when they first met. "What's this for?" she asked, puzzled. Lucas smiled, the same smile that still made her heart skip after all these years. "I thought we might like to sleep under the stars sometimes," he explained, "to remember how it all began." That night, With their children safely in the care of a neighbor, they rode to a secluded spot overlooking their land. As they lay together in the tent, the familiar sound of rain began pattering on the canvas above them. "Would you believe it?" Rebecca laughed. "Rain again." Lucas pulled her closer, his voice soft in the darkness. "Best rain of my life," he murmured against her hair. "Brought me everything I never knew I needed." Rebecca pressed closer, content in the knowledge that what had begun as a chance encounter on a stormy trail had blossomed into a love as vast and enduring as the frontier itself.